And it's officially springtime, so we'll be seeing a lot of sun over the next several months, and that's good news for solar power. A couple weeks ago, Market Journal's Troy Moling spoke with Nebraska Extension's John Hay about the steps the ag industry is taking to make this a feasible moneymaker for farmers. Here's part 2 of that conversation.
A lot of companies out there really trying to advertise to landowners, trying to get some leases signed. There are some leases being signed. I think some of those companies are very serious about something that might happen. We actually have some chances of getting some large solar projects in Nebraska in the next few years. There are some companies also, I think, that are out there trying to just accumulate larger amounts of land in the hope that in the future that there will be value for that. And these are long-term contracts, and so they're really, really important to pay attention to. You can imagine that if this contract was signed, it's a 40-year contract. A contract signed in 1979 would just be expiring this year.
Wow, yeah.
And so we don't know what that future, 40 years from the future, looks like. So that's a hard decision to make, and one you really want to talk to your family a lot about and make sure that a attorney's involved in the discussion.
And you said there was one agreement in place for what, 3,000 acres?
Yeah, there's some large land leases out there for potential solar farms. There's one north of Norfolk that made it into the paper recently. It's a fairly large one, and I rounded that to maybe 3,000 acres. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but that's a really big solar project, and so those types of things are out there, and that's really changing the face of those areas a little bit, because that will be a lot of land under lease.
And you were telling me before we started, how many solar panels would that be on that amount of land?
Hundreds of thousands of solar panels on that. It would just, it's hard to imagine that size of a system. But at the same time, if the economics are right, you know, those farmers have a chance to make some money. If the price of electricity is right, it doesn't affect our price of electricity much, maybe even helps it a little bit. So it's all about those economics.
Okay, so we talked about the federal tax credit for 2019. Any other changes to the laws or regulations we should be aware of?
Well, there are some potential changes. I mean, obviously, somebody asked me one time, what's the risk of putting this solar array in? And I said, well, the risk is policy change. Where with policy changes, the price of that electricity may be different than what we ran in our economic analysis. And there are some bills in the legislature right now that might change Nebraska's policy. We'll follow those and see how that goes. They're not major changes, but they are changes, and we'll see. There are some changes that have taken place in other states as well. So kind of follow those things, and you could do the calculation with the new policy if that would be a way to try to mitigate that risk a little bit.
And another proposal we got out there, the Green New Deal that was recently introduced by some politicians in D.C. So you're an energy guy. What does that mean for energy? Well,
the Green New Deal is fascinating in a lot of ways, but you know, it can also get very political. But I do look at it in a way to say that the idea that we want to talk about what it would take to maybe have more renewables in this country is an interesting discussion in and of itself. And where that's going to go, I don't know. I think that the reality is that cooler heads are going to come up with, hopefully, you know, middle of the road decisions that are both economically feasible and lead us to more green energy. But the reality is, thinking about what it would take is a good discussion, and we ought to not necessarily look at some of those things as negatively as they have been in certain circles.